is a principal nuclear. Okay, so today we have Dr. Prince Gyekye. He is a principal nuclear regulatory officer with the Nuclear Regulatory Authority of Ghana. He heads the Emergency Preparedness and Response Department. He holds a PhD in physics from the University of Cape Coast, where he received an award for his outstanding thesis. With over 15 years of experience in regulating radiation applications in Ghana, he has supervised 8 MPhil students and is currently supervising 4 PhD students. Dr. Gyekye has 21 peer-reviewed publications, 1 book, and 6 conference papers to his name. So Dr. Gyekye will be presenting on regulating radiation applications in Ghana. So Doc, the floor is yours.
Good. I just unmuted myself. Thank you very much, Joshua, for your introduction. So it's a pleasure to join all of you. And when I was approached to give a presentation on radiation applications, I asked in which area, and I realized that yes, one of the core mandates of the Nuclear Regulatory Authority is to ensure that users of radiation and then the public also educate the public on radiation use. So it's a pleasure to join you or to share what is existing in terms of radiation applications in Ghana. Good. So I will not go ahead with the specific details on the screen now. I will move to my outline. So I'll be discussing with you the legal and regulatory infrastructure, what exists in Ghana, how safety and security of sources are ensured, source inventories, the sources that we have in the country, authorization of radiation sources, the process in which one has to go through for the authorization process, inspection process as well, so that you appreciate what we do in terms of conducting inspections as well. Good. And then incidents and reports. So when you use radiation, there are going to be accidents. There will happen accidents and incidents as well. The incidents are the minor ones. You will need to report to the regulatory body. And then some new facilities that are in the country, which are groundbreaking. It's very important that you all know that these facilities are available. It might be yourself or any other family member that you might want to recommend that, yes, if they are going through this situation, they might want to use these new facilities. Good. Let me minimize this. So, before 1993, before radiation was not being regulated, just before 1993 was not being regulated, in the terms as in there was no recognized institution that is mainly responsible for regulating radiation. That was before 1993. But radiation was being used as at that time. So from 1993 all the way to 2015, radiation use in the country was then being regulated by the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. Now, from 1993, it became necessary that they go into the regulation of radiation because Ghana expressed interest to have the cobalt-60 for radiotherapy, which is used for treatment of cancer. And the international organizations said, we are not going to give you the cobalt-60 unless you do have a form of regulating the cobalt 60. You have an independent body that regulates the cobalt 60. So it became necessary that Ghana has to have a legislative instrument, which is the 1559 in 1993, so we could have the cobalt 60, so that we can save lives in Ghana, because the cobalt 60 was used for cancer treatment. Yes. But going forward, we realized that, yes, Atomic Energy Commission, Ghana Atomic, they were doing a very good job, but there was a conflict in terms of the regulatory bodies at the international level. Yes, because Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, they use radiation for peaceful purposes, and at the same time, they are serving as regulators. So it became necessary that there should be an independent body, which is away from the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. So in 2015, the Nuclear Regulatory Authority was established by an Act of Parliament 895. Okay. So the authority started operating basically in January 2016, and the Act repeals the previous legislative instrument which was available for regulating radiation. It repealed it. So it took all the regulatory functions from Ghana Atomic Energy Commission to the new established body, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Authority. Okay. So this is a snapshot of the Act. And the Act talks mainly about three main things: is to provide for the regulation and management of activities and practice for peaceful. The word peaceful, if you intend to go into radiation use, which you do not want to use, you are not in favor of using it for peaceful use, and you intend to use it for any other means apart from peaceful use, then this Act will not include you. So peaceful use of nuclear material or energy, radioactive materials, or radiation. And then if you want to also provide for the protection of persons and the environment against the harmful use of radiation, this Act covers that as well. The Act also covers to ensure that as Ghana, where we are, if we intend to use radiation for its intended purpose, we need to oblige with the international obligations. So it's to ensure that the effective implementation of the country's international obligations, and for its related matters, which has to do with nuclear matters or nuclear radiation matters, are satisfied. Good. So Section 1A of the Act 895 says that the Act applies to, which basically talks about the regulation and management of activities, which was the first point, which has to do with the application of the Act. Now it says if you want to use radiation or nuclear materials for peaceful purposes, you will have to comply with this Act. And it basically includes what? Production, if you want to produce nuclear or radioactive material; possession, if you want to possess it for any other reason; if you want to use it; if you want to import, export; transportation, transfer, handling, management of radioactive waste, because if you deal with radioactive materials, in the end, it will not be used, it cannot be used for its intended purposes. So it cannot be used for its intended purpose, but it still has some radiation in it, and it is dangerous to people and the environment. And the law makes it open that any related activity or practice identified by the authority. Yes, because with things changing, if somebody goes into any activity by using radiation, which is not captured here, the law ensures that that individual is being regulated. You can use it for anything you want to use it for, but it must be regulated. So Section 91 and 92 of the Act 895 empowers the authority to develop regulations and guides. So basically, we have 5 regulations and we have 7 approved guidance documents. Why should we develop regulations? You have the Act. The Act is the law. And the law does not go into the details of how one is supposed to undertake certain objectives if you are going to use radiation. So the regulation now comes down into details, as in the law says you are supposed to have, example, an emergency response plan. So the regulation then goes into details to itemize out how the emergency response plan should look like. So the Act 895 and the regulation is a requirement. If you do not go by the Act 895 or the regulations, any of the regulations, you are open for an enforcement, which I will discuss enforcement later on. Now there are 7 approved guidance documents. The guidance documents, they are not supposed to be enforced. They are actually developed to help one comply with the regulation. So it becomes very necessary that if one does not comply with the regulation, then you're being taken to court or you're being fined a certain amount. Then you realize that the regulatory body had a guidance document in having how to comply with an emergency procedure or emergency plan. It is already there. But you decided as an applicant or operator, you decided not to go by those guidance documents provided by the regulatory body, but you just probably want to break the law. When we get to enforcement, we realize that we can take the person to court. We can also give administrative fines as well. Good. So the regulatory body, in terms of radiation, is with the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation. Currently, it is under that ministry. Now, this is the structure of the regulatory body. There's the board, which we have board chairman and then other board members. Now, key to it is that the board members, we have representative from the Nuclear Security, Environmental Protection Agency. We also have from other government representatives. And it's most important for you to know that, yes, the Director General of the regulatory body, that is based on our act, is supposed to be appointed by government. So government appoints the Director General, but it's always important that the Director General being appointed must be in the area of radiation or science, or must be familiar with the work being done. So right from the Director General, you have Deputy Director Generals. And I must say we have only 2 technical directorates. We have the directorate responsible for nuclear installations, because Ghana has expressed interest to go into nuclear power plants power production, which we intend to site a nuclear power plant. And then, which the nuclear power plant, we do not have that yet, but there are documentations that need to be done, and that directorate is responsible for that. And then we have the radiological section, which those practices were being used even before 1993. And then there's the administrative directorate. Those are to help move the documentations. Let's look at the staffing level. Now, the staffing level, based on the topic, I focused on radiological applications or radiation applications, and it's more focused on what is existing in the country, which most of you or some of you might have experienced from time to time, because I don't think nobody has undergone X-ray examinations before, because if you go to any of the polytechnics, you go to the university or the technical university now, you need to perform a medical test. And one of the requirements is that you need to undergo X-ray examination. And currently, based on the staff for the people that regulate X-ray and other radiological applications, we have a chief nuclear regulator, who's one person, and currently the director. And then we have 3 principals. We have seniors which is just 1. Nuclear regulator officers that are 5. So in all, we are looking at about 35. I just want to draw your attention to the qualifications. If you look at the qualifications, we are looking at chemistry, physics, radiation protection. Our electronic guys, we are looking at HND in electronics, because we use certain equipment that must perform consistently, because our regulatory judgment is based on those equipments as well. Good. So let's look at safety and security of sources. So in the country, in Ghana, currently, we can say that all the radiation sources being used, they are under regulatory control. Yes. And there's always a regulatory oversight. Now, the regulatory oversight that exists currently basically starts from the design. That is when you intend, because right from the notification, which I will introduce you to the regulatory process, from the design, construction, importation of the source, because currently we do not manufacture any radiation emitting equipment in the country. So if it's going to come in, we know very well it's going to come from outside Ghana. So there must be an import permit for that source to come in. How do we ensure that? I will get to that point. Transport, use, decommissioning, and then waste management. Waste management deals with radioactive materials, the materials that they cannot be used for what it is intended to be used for, but it is still dangerous. It can harm people. And when we talk about people, we are talking about 3 main categories of people. We are talking about the staff, the public, and then the patient. Now, all of you listening to me, based on radiation protection, from where I stand, if I am supposed to give a judgment based on how you're supposed to be protected from radiation, you are going to be identified in one category. You cannot be in 2 categories at a point in time. It's either you're a staff, you're a public, or you're a patient. And that's when, based on the regulatory requirements, you can be protected. So the question is, you can get someone who is a staff. Now the person gets sick. The person then becomes a patient. It's very simple. Person who is a staff is now shifted to the patient category. Now the patient category, there are different protection measures because radiation has to be used in the country. And in its application, what is the protection measures that are being put in place? In order to put the measures in place, you need to identify the individual and say, for you, at this point in time, you are a patient. So if you're a patient, these are the protection measures that are applicable to you. Because if you apply somebody who works as a staff, now the person gets sick and then becomes a patient, and you apply that, the basic principles for that of a staff, you are going to fail and the patient is going to die in the end. Good. So it's protection of people and then the environment. That's what we seek to look at. Then under safety and security, we always ensure that people who use the radiation, because apart from us ensuring that the right principles are used for the category of people, and we also ensure that the one who is administering the radiation or using the radiation is qualified. So when it comes to security of the installation. So security of installation, we basically look at category 1 and category 2 sources. Now, category 1 is strange to you. I will cite a typical example. So if we take the cobalt-60, which is used for radiotherapy, apart from it being used for peaceful purpose, it can also be used for malicious purpose. If somebody wants to get hold of the cobalt-60, it can be used to harm a lot of Ghanaians. So we put security measures in place. Yes. And then we take the category 2 sources as well. For the category 2 sources, we are also looking at what we call the brachytherapy sources. Now, these are sources for treating cancer, but they are injected into your skin. Now, these sources are very high sources. So they can also be used to harm other people. If I probably might be a terrorist or I intend to harm my enemy, I might want to steal that source. So security measures are actually in place for source category 1 and 2. During the application, every applicant is supposed to bring an emergency response plan, and the plan has to be approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Authority, which is established by the Act 895. If it's not approved, you cannot work. So when it comes to the inspections, we look at safety and security of the sources as well. Let me deal with the import and export. So with import and export, I made mention of how we do not produce radioactive material. So there's a tendency for, it's not that tendency, there's always the probability that people will bring in these radioactive materials, that's one, or buy from another person who is in the country, which we call transfer. So if you are bringing it into the country, there's what we call the import and export permit applications. We have a very good memorandum of understanding with GRA, which is Ghana Revenue Authority, which is the customs division. And when any source comes into the country without an import permit, or when any source comes into the country, the first question the customs officer will ask is, do you have an import permit? That's the first question is going to be asked. So the import permit they know has to come from the Nuclear Regulatory Authority. Now, with regards to it's basically including export too. If you are taking any radioactive material out, customs always ask, where is the export permit? Because this source cannot be used on its own. It must be used based on authorization from the Nuclear Regulatory Authority. So the Customs Division will always ask this. Where is the import permit? Without the import or export permit, you cannot clear it till you clear that procedure with the responsible authority, which happens to be the Nuclear Regulatory Authority. Now, what are we looking at? We are looking at the model and serial numbers of the particular device you are bringing in. And when you are bringing it in, we must know that you have business registration certificate, and for existing facilities, you might have some tax clearance. Yes, basically what we want to know is that, yes, you are registered in Ghana, and that because we are going to authorize a source to be used by your entity or a company, we must know that you are basically authorized to work in the country, and that if there is a problem, we can always take the CEO or the chief executive or the representative, we can take that person to court. So we always want to know that you're a registered company in Ghana. If you're not registered, you will never be licensed to use any radiation in the country. Now, if you are bringing in a source, we must know that you have a place to keep it. Now, when you bring in a source, I will discuss this into details. A radioactive materials, they are intended for a certain purpose. Now, when they are used for that purpose and it's exhausted, it cannot be used for that purpose anymore. But it does not mean that it cannot harm individuals. It is still a dangerous source. So we need to know, what is your arrangement? Are you going to take it out of the country, or you intend to keep it in the country? When you intend to keep it in the country, we need to know your arrangements as well. Now, when you are taking the source out of the country, the first thing we will ask is, where are you taking it to? If you say Sierra Leone, the first thing that comes is that Sierra Leone know that you are bringing such a source to them. You say yes. Then we say, where is the agreement or the certificate from Sierra Leone authority that you are bringing the source to them? We need to see that. We also have a good collaboration with the Sierra Leone authority, because we train basically, Ghana train basically the Director General, whoever, all those people are Sierra Leone authority. We train basically all of them. So we have a good relationship with them. We can just send a quick information. Do you know this person? Are they bringing the source to you? Is this issued from your end? Because what we realize that someone can come to lie to us that I want to take the source out, but he decides not to take it out. We issue the person with the export permit. He decides not to take it out, but dig the ground in Ghana and bury it there. So if you are taking it out, we need to know where it's going to. The authorities must be sure that, yes, they are receiving such a source, and we will communicate with the authorities in the other countries. Import and export permits are normally valid for 6 months. When you apply for it, you have 6 months to take it out of the country. Now, in terms of safety and security, the people that work with the source, the only way they can tell that they are being exposed to radiation is what we call the personal monitoring. So we ensure that people are being monitored. And currently, we have licensed 3 dosimetry service providers. So they provide the radiation to the individual, and they send the radiation amount that individual has received to the organization, and they send us a copy as well, so we can track how the staff are being protected from radiation. Okay. So the license for the dosimetry service providers are usually 3 years. We give them 3 years duration. Afterwards, we then go in, perform an inspection. Now, the inspection with the dosimetry service providers is very simple because they are looking at figures, they are measuring numbers, and they are telling us that this individual is safe. What we do is we check their measurement tools. Has it been calibrated? Because if it's not calibrated, what happens is that the information they are giving to you and to us as well is not very, very, very relevant. It's not appropriate. So we basically check for accurate calibration of this equipment, just to be sure that, yes, the people that work with radiation are safe as well. So let me introduce you to some of the sources that we have in the country. From the regulatory point of view, what we use to keep an inventory of the sources is a Regulatory Authority Information System, which we call the RISE. We are using the version 3.14 now. Now, this particular system also helps us basically to schedule authorization status, inspections as well. When we are supposed to go for inspection, how do we know that a particular facility authorization has expired or not? And then also make us know that this facility, they are supposed to perform, they're supposed to put some non-compliances measures in place, and that we need to visit that facility to enforce those non-compliances as well. Yeah. Now, all authorizations that we issue to people that apply to us, whether it is in the design stage all the way to decommissioning stage. To design stage is when you are starting. Decommissioning stage is when you are done. Now, all the licenses that we give to you, all the authorization that we grant to you, they always come with some imposed conditions. Because we know that based on some unforeseen conditions, whilst on the ground, we give you an authorization to construct. But whilst constructing, you want to make some modification. Now, when you want to make any modification, we should know, because the license was issued to you based on what you submitted to us in the drawing right in the office. Good. So when we issue any authorization to an operator or an applicant, what we do is that we put the conditions there. Now, when you breach the conditions, is a non-compliance, and an enforcement action will be applicable to you. So currently, if due to Right to Information Act, if you officially write to request for a specifics, maybe you want to conduct a researching or radiation emitting equipment in terms of diagnostics. Diagnostics, you need to be specific. Is it X-ray, fluoroscopy? We can provide you with that data. Why? Because we keep an inventory keep an inventory of all of this application that come to us. And we basically use a regulatory authority information system that purpose. Good. So having used the RISE, which is the regulatory authority information system, it captures all of these things I'm going to discuss with you. So if you are to talk about a nuclear installation that is in the country, we are talking about the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission Research Reactor, okay, which is a 32 kilowatts. Now, the 32 kilowatts basically means we're using the word kilo because it's purely used for research. So the power of that research reactor is minimized, it's very small. Yeah, research reactors that are in mega. Now, those ones can be used to produce radioactive materials as well. Good. So apart from the existing nuclear installation, that's the only nuclear installation in the country, let's look at some medical applications. There are two cobalt-60 therapy units. We are talking about Kolebu and Kofanochi Teaching Hospital. There are 4 brachytherapy units, which we are looking at Kolebu, Kofanochi, and then a private facility, which is called Sweden Ghana Medical Center. There are 3 Linux, which is shared among the 3 centers I just talked about, Kolebu, Sweden Ghana, and then Kofanochi. There are only 2 nuclear medicine centers that we actually recognize, which is Kolebu and Kofanochi as well. And when it comes to the general ones, that I would say most of you, apart from if any of you have experienced cobalt-60 therapy unit, most of you would have experienced this because it's a requirement for entry into universities. We have licensed about 1,000 X-ray units currently. And then the X-ray unit talks about computed tomography, which has a different approach. General X-ray is what most of you have been experienced to, mammography, and then it goes on as well. There are so many applications of the X-ray units. Yeah. So when you go to industrial applications, for industrial application, we have the gamma irradiator facility. There's only one of them, which is at Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. We have a lot of well-logging sources because of the introduction of oil. Because Ghana discovered oil, and well-logging sources basically tells the operators how deep they have gone into a particular ground. We have nuclear gauges. Now, the nuclear gauges are typically used for road construction, production of your beverages. Industrial radiography is also there, about 26 of them, which is also used in the oil and gas in the industry as well. So I will rush through the authorization process that one has to know. So basically, you need to notify us. You need to notify us that you intend to use radiation. So failure to notify the authority is an enforcement. You have breached the Act 895. And again, I will say that when you breach the Act, it basically means that you are not in the known. But if you are not in the known, it doesn't mean that the law does not exist. The law exists. So wherever you intend to go into, you need to know the existing laws. You need to notify us. When you notify us, let us know what you intend to do, who is responsible. The main aim is what you intend to do, because when you are clear on what you intend to do and the location, we'll be able to say that, okay, you can have it at that particular location. Yes. Because if you want to go into certain practices, you cannot have it in a residential area. No. There are certain practices you cannot cite it in a residential area. Good. Now, apart from notifying us, you also need to let us know how your design is going to look at, which we call the structural design and construction approval. We will give you a permit for that, but we need to know how it looks like. We need to have a clear idea. Now, in looking at it, we are basically looking at it from the angle of how do we to protect people. Now, the people we are looking at is the staff, and then the one who is going to operate the machine. Because currently, the patient is not there, so the patient is left out. If you remember, I said people, so because of the staff, public, and then the patient. But currently, at the design stage, the patient is not there. So we are only looking at what? The public and the staff. You make sure you demarcate the necessary areas as well, that you've provided enough radiation protection, which you call shielding. We'll look at your shielding calculations as well. Good. Now, when we go to that stage, then we go to import and export application. Now, currently, we do not produce any radioactive material in the country. So we know that any radioactive material coming into the country will either have to be what? Come out of outside Ghana, or one person might buy from another person within the country. So there's an application form for that, which you look at the import permit and basically looks at the name, address, what you intend to do, the model, serial number, what you intend to keep, all those things. Now, a key thing I must mention that if you are exporting it out of the country, we must know the agreement, the radioactive waste agreement. That's one. We must also know that the receiving country has issued an import permit, because we do the same thing. Because if we do not issue an import permit, no source comes into the country. So the receiving country must issue an import permit. If those things are not there, then you cannot export the source out of the country. The validation for import and export permits is 6 months. Now let's look at the critical part where you apply for authorization. So having gone through the notification, design approval, import application, now you need, so after import application, whatever you want to install, you do the installation and everything. Now you do want to use it for its intended purpose, you need to apply for authorization. There's a specific form for you to get or to apply. There's a website for you to access. Now, one of the key things I must mention here is our main concern is with the operators. Because if you've gone through all the process, now our main concern is with the operators. Are they qualified? Can they do what they are supposed to do? So we request for series and certificates of the operators. And then during operation, you must go by some radiation protection measures. So we request a radiation protection program. And then including that, we look for also the emergency response plan. Because when you're using anything, then it's bound for you to have an accident, and it may occur. When it does, or an incident, when it does occur, how do you handle it? When all the application comes in, especially for application for authorization, it comes into the regulatory, it is reviewed. It is basically reviewed with their requirements. Review this with the requirements, what the requirement says. Good. So let's look at the authorization. Now, by way of putting what we call high risk, medium risk, and low risk, because the attention you pay to a low risk should be less to the attention you pay to a high risk. So based on our categorization here, I can cite examples. When we say category, which is low, category 3 to 5, and devices 1 to 4, 150, less than 150 kV, we are talking about your general x-rays, the general x-rays that you go to the normal hospitals, especially most of you are going to university, you undergo the general x-ray, or if there's a problem with a broken bone, that is applicable. The license that is given to you is what we call registration. It's only for 1 year, but inspections are conducted every 3 years. Then we go to the medium one. And then now the medium one, we are shifting to high risk, but not very high. We're talking about cancer treatment, but using very low radiation. The reason why you're using very low radiation is because you have tried to enter into the human being, which we call the interstitial. You push the source into the human being's skin. Yes, where you have identified to have the cancer, you push the source into that skin. Why are you doing that? It's basically for treatment. You want to save the individual. And then the high risk ones, we are talking about those ones that has very high amount of radiation. You do not need to go into the skin. You need to stay outside and do what you intend to do in terms of treatment of cancer. Now, the durations are all 1 year. The inspections are actually 1 year for the medium risk and high risk. But when it comes to the low risk, inspections for us to be there physically is 3 years. So when it comes to the review and assessment, everything comes to the authority. We do the review and assessment. We generate a report. Okay. Now, when you generate a report, there may be 4 main outcomes. It's either we are going to request for more information, or we are going to, based on information provided, you have satisfied everything, we are going to give you a license. Or based on what has been provided to us for this particular facility, we need to conduct an inspection. Or based on what has been provided to us, we are not satisfied at all, so we need to issue an enforcement. Yes. So let's go to what we do in terms of inspections. So I'll summarize this. Our inspections are basically based on 2 main types. We have the planned and then reactive. Planned, we know for the year the number of inspections we are going to conduct. The reactive are the emergencies and other incidents that may occur that we have to react to them. Okay. Now, the frequency for planned inspections, which you already know, runs from 1 to 3 years. When we are conducting the inspection, it's normally conducted by 2 inspectors. Now, the reason why do we use 2 inspectors? Now, we are using 2 inspectors because 1, which is very critical, is that when you conduct the inspection as an individual, it's possible that you might forget a few things. So when you do forget, you have a second person to help you remember what you have forgotten. That's 1. Now, the second thing is what? Now, how the second thing has to do with you want to prevent compromise, where you send one person, he sees something, and then he says something else. Yes, we basically want to prevent that. So we send 2 people. Yes, if you want to compromise the 2 people, that is fine. But another measure we put in place is if you compromise the 2 people in the next year, it's not those 2 people coming for the inspection. So whatever is the issue, the other 2 people should be able to identify that. And it becomes very difficult to find out about 4 people who have the same ideology. Very difficult. So conducting inspections, we use a specific protocol so that we can be precise, so that whoever is inspecting a particular machine, they are very consistent. They do not say things out of what they think has to be there. We want to promote consistency. So there's a protocol. The operators will be aware of that protocol. So if the inspector is saying something which does not sit well with the protocol, the operator should be able to bring him online that, what are you talking about? It is not in your protocol. So why are you exaggerating so many other things? Yeah. Good. So with regards to the inspection protocols, it covers all the areas I discussed with you, especially when you want to protect people and then the environment. Yes. In the detailed protocol, it talks about safety and security, worker protection, public protection, your emergency arrangements that you have in place, medical exposure, that is if you are dealing with hospitals, how are they able to ensure that the patient being exposed to radiation is supposed to be exposed to radiation? We do check that. When you check the details of the protocol, it is there. Verification of records, because since we are a regulatory body, most of the things that we do check when we are on the field is records. So you must have the records in place. Now, when everything is done, inspection is done, we write a report. Now the report may recommend that the facility should be authorized or not authorized. Yes. Good. So when the facility is not authorized, then that means there must be an enforcement. So if you're going to have an enforcement, it's either most of the times, because if it's an existing facility, because they have already been licensed, there are conditions of the authorization. And in practice, most people do not read the conditions of the authorization. So they always find themselves being non-compliant with the regulatory requirements. And from either the non-compliance of the conditions, or you have a new facility that starts operating without authorization, yes, we will issue a non-enforcement action. Now, how do we go by our non-enforcement process? First of all, you need to identify the non-compliance issue. Now, in identifying the non-compliance issue, you need to be sure that the non-compliance that you have identified is well situated, is in either the act, which is a legal requirement, or your regulation. Because it must be specific that you are supposed to do this. And if you're saying somebody has not complied with a certain requirement, you must state that requirement. Now, the moment you state that, it becomes a legal requirement, and that individual will have to comply, or the necessary enforcement action will have to be applied. Now, in enforcing or applying the necessary enforcement action, we look at what we call the graded approach, where we look at the severity and the significance of what we are dealing with. Okay, before we take the necessary action. So let me go to the next stage. Now, the next stage talks about the severity of what has occurred, of the non-compliance. If the non-compliance is classified as no immediate threat to health and safety, then what happens? The action one has to take is that you may want to say they can continue whilst they address the issue. It doesn't mean that they will escape maybe administrative fines or warning letters. But you're not, basically, you can give them administrative fines, warning letters, but you're not stopping them from working. But they do not do what they're supposed to do. Okay. So when you take potential threats to health and safety, now, potential threat to health and safety, operation of facilities is likely not to be safe. The enforcement action one has to apply is you need to stop them, completely stop them from operation. And they should get the issues addressed. Because this basically borders on people being exposed to unnecessary radiation. So for potential threat to health and safety and operation of facility likely not to be safe, you may want to apply administrative fines. You may send the warning letters, but in the end, you still have to prosecute them based on the seriousness of the non-compliance. One of our conditions to the authorized person is that you have 48 hours to notify us if there's an incident. It's spelled out in the condition of authorization. You are basically responsible for notifying the police because you find yourself in a certain locality, which the authority is not in that locality. So you need to notify the police and the public. If it becomes a public issue, you are basically responsible for that. But you're also responsible for providing the authority with updates if we need to come in, especially if the source is missing and cannot be found, because the authority has the mandate to notify the International Atomic Energy Agency, either through the security means, which we call the illicit trafficking in database management, or through the safety means, which we call the Unified System for Information Exchange. So as a regulatory body, as we've told them to notify us within 48 hours, when we are notified, we will ensure that the facility emergency response plan is activated, because we do not authorize any facility to work until they do have an emergency response plan in place. Now, the facility level emergencies are supposed to be complied with, which is within their location. The moment it gets out of their location, then it becomes a national disaster. So we call in the National Disaster Management Organization. Now, if anybody at all, which I've talked about this, so I'll summarize it. If you use any radioactive material, which is about 60, cesium-137, that is not intended for its purpose anymore. You have two options. Either you return to the supplier, or you get the authorized central storage facility, which currently happens to be at the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. Yes. So first of all, if it's not being used, you remove it from the line or where it's being used. But when you remove it, you must ensure that security measures are in place, because that's a dangerous source. So you keep it in a very safe bunker. Then you apply for a decommissioning permit. Then you let us know whether you intend to save it with the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission or you intend to send it out. There's a reason why, because sometimes you get people bringing the source in and they have a good agreement, it must be taken out. But when it's out of use and they want to take it out, the company that exists probably might have gone through certain issues, so do not exist anymore. Bankruptcy, so many other things. So the Ghana Atomic Energy Agency has to take it in for that facility. So there used to be orphan sources. That was way before 1993, because as I said before, these sources were not being regulated. So they were being used as and when their instruction manuals told them to be used. So through an initiative from United States, which we call the Global Threat Reduction Initiative, we were able to locate most of these orphan sources. Yes, especially for golden mines and other places as well. We brought all of them to the Central Waste Management Storage Facility. The current protocol in place is if anybody finds any orphan source, now the orphan source is a source which is not licensed to any individual. It's not for any person. That's what we call orphan source. if anybody feels that I've seen radiation, so I've seen a container lying somewhere and has radiation sign on it, now that becomes an orphan source. When we check the serial numbers and everything and we track it and it's not linked to any of our licensed facilities, then it's an orphan source. It's our responsibility to take that orphan source to storage. We have good collaboration, as I said before, with Ghana Revenue Authority, Customs Division, Food and Drugs Board, Petroleum Commission, Health Facilities and Regulatory Authority. They are very critical because they license all X-ray machines in the country. Environmental Protection Agency as well, because they go from mines to mines inspection. Ghana Police Service. Now, we do have a memorandum of understanding, which is basically a draft. It's been submitted to all these agencies. For currently, we are going through the review and approval of these. Good. Now, lastly, we are expecting some innovations, some new applications of radiation, which I did not talk about in the inventory. No, I did not talk about them because they are basically in the construction stage. Now, there's what we call the medical cyclotron. Now, the medical cyclotron basically produces radionuclides for nuclear medicine, which is used for cancer treatment. Now, anybody who has a relation or very familiar with cancer treatment, you realize that it takes, if you go to Kolebu now, there's a very long queue and there's so many things associated with it. Why? Because we always need to import these things. So everything that has to come from outside, and there are a few of them. So when we have majority of these in the country, the waiting time is limited. Now, one of the disadvantages, the more there's a waiting time, the patient that has already been diagnosed with cancer deteriorates. Because the moment they are diagnosed, they cannot be treated because there are people that have been diagnosed like 2-3 months ago, which they need to be treated. So it's very important that we expand this, and we're excited that yes, we have new installations coming in. One for the medical cyclotron is for cancer diagnosis. Diagnosis basically finding out where the cancer is. It may also probably in the end be used for treatment as well. And there are more examination machines coming out for that as well. And then the medical LINAC, the last point, medical LINAC, which has to do with cancer treatments. Now, the more we have this cancer treatment, then, as I said, people will be saved the moment they are diagnosed. Okay. So in my conclusion, yeah, there is an act to regulate all radiation in the country. The main aim of having this act is to protect people and the environment. And then we do have regulatory processes in place that everybody has to comply with, especially those that intend to use radiation to save people. And we have good collaboration with government agencies. Thank you very much. Hello, I am done.
Well, thank you, Dr. Prince. Much grateful for the insights you have taken us into NRA, and most of us might be passing through atomic energy, be seeing the sign of NRA, but little did we know, maybe except that if you have a friend, what do you do? Maybe you just hear one of two, the NRA, and how atomic, when you go out and you mention you work at atomic or you are going to atomic, it puts some kind of fear into people. Little we know that you rather are there to protect us from some of these things that we live with already within the community. And thank you so much. I have some few questions, but I think I will rather open the platform for others to ask, then I come in. And so if you're online, it's time for question. Just raise up your hand. I'll call you, then you'll meet yourself to ask Dr. Prince a question about his presentation and his organization, NRA. Please just notify me if you have a question. Sekhant, Lara, I see you. Nadia from Kenya, yeah, I see you. Thank you for joining from Kenya. Lumo Bismarck, thank you, Justice. And iPhone, not Nyako, David, Atise. Please, if you have a question, just unmute your microphone and ask the question. Yes, Nadia, yes. Yes, unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Nadia.
Yeah, Nadia Hashim from Kenya. I've
Good.
also opened my video. Maybe you can see me also.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for the nice presentation. I would like to discuss about radiation exposure for cosmic ray radiation exposure. Do you have regulations in Ghana concerning the exposure to cosmic radiation by air crew? Why I'm saying this is because we have the ISO standard on regulating radiation exposure to cosmic radiation. So what is your experience in Ghana? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Dr. Prince.
Good question. So when you talk about cosmic radiation, so probably in my introduction I didn't talk about types of radiation. So cosmic radiation forms part of natural background radiation. Yes. Now cosmic is radiation from the sun, and I don't think that anybody can excuse themselves from the sun, because you need to go out one way or the other. Yes. So if ISO talks about regulating cosmic radiation, based on the regulatory body's point of view, where we stand when it comes to regulating radiation, cosmic radiation is classified as a background radiation. So the reason why we say it's a background radiation is now we use radiation detectors to find out whether there's radiation at somewhere or not. Now, if I put on my radiation detector, the first thing it's going to pick is cosmic radiation, because there's the sun, so it's going to pick cosmic radiation. So I've never had my detector going to zero. You can never have the background being zero. There is always what we call the background radiation. So there's cosmic, and then there's what we call the natural occurring radioactive material. Now those ones are emitted from the Earth crust. They're right from the Earth. You cannot regulate these things from where we come from. So from nuclear regulatory point of view and International Atomic Energy's point of view, you cannot put specific measures in place for cosmic radiation, because the moment we begin doing this, then we are saying that when anybody is going out, you should wear certain clothes to protect yourself, but is not proven to be. Cosmic radiation is what we call background, and it is with us. It's with us to stay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, the dose due to cosmic radiation varies with latitude as well as altitude. So if you fly, for example, in the northern hemisphere, you get more exposed to cosmic radiation as compared to flying near the equator. So we have some ISO standards we have adopted in Kenya, the ISO 2785 series. This is about a dosimetry for exposures to cosmic radiation in civilian aircraft. It comes in several parts, I think part 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So in a nutshell, the dose that you get from cosmic radiation depends on the route that you take, the flight profile, and all that. So we are thinking in Kenya, together with the regulator, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and the academia, to see how best we can implement this ISO standard and start regulating cosmic ray exposure, especially for the aircraft crew. You are right, for the general public who are just on the Earth's surface, you cannot shield yourself from cosmic radiation. It is always there. Problem comes in, or exposure comes in, when you consider crew, aircraft crew, those who are occupationally exposed to cosmic radiation. So that's something that we are discussing in Kenya. We can discuss more and share some experiences also with other member states in Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very good. So when it comes to now you mentioned the aircraft crew. Yes, so they are always in the air. Yes, so they are high risk of being exposed to cosmic radiation. So in order to bring it under regulatory control, just as you said, you are discussing with Kenyan regulatory body. I know your Director General, James Chumba. You can do this by initially starting from 1 or 2 or 3 measurements to find out whether they are high or more. Because from regulatory point of view, you want to find out whether it is justified. We use the word justification. Are the people flying from one place to the other? Are they being exposed to more radiation, or they are not? If they are being exposed to more radiation, then you might want to then go into monitoring the aircraft crew as well. What you said is right.
Thank you for the questions, Nadia, Hashim. Thank you so much for the insight as well. Yeah, Doc, is there any question here? Okay, yes. I want to ask you, what are the regular or frequent complaints that most often come from the public on some of these radioactive activities in the public, within the public domain?
Yeah, so most of the regular ones, I think when I was talking about sighting, I made mention of you should be careful. So we are very careful of where you want to site any radioactive material. So there's this has been a trend, but I'll cite one, which happens to be at Islegon. So the facility wanted to to put up a diagnostic facility at Islegon, and there was a big complaint from the neighbors that they are going to expose them to unnecessary radiation. You all know Islegon. Maybe you have other foreigners with us, but most people know Islegon is the affluent areas. So the neighbors said no, they are not going to allow the facilities to set up. So for us, we looked at protection of the public and the people, and based on what they intend to do, which they intend to set up an X-ray facility, we realized that if they are able to put up the necessary shielding structures in place, the public, which even the public we are talking about are the immediate public, meaning if I'm bringing my patient, if I'm bringing my daughter or my son or my mother or father to the place, he or she gets to go in there, but for me, I am protected. So looking at a neighbor who was about who is basically about 50 or 30 meters away from where the radiation is being used should not be a concern. It should be, we know very well that radiation is going to be limited. But there was this concern from the neighborhood, from the neighborhood committee. They took us to court. Yes, they took the regulatory body to court, including EPA, because EPA was the first person to give them the go-ahead that they can site it there. And then we, Environmental Protection Agency, which is EPA, and then the Nuclear Regulatory Authority went in. Then looking at the siting and based on the design, if you remember my present, the design brought to us, we said it's okay because the radiation is going to stay inside. Now we were taken to court and we have to go to defend ourselves. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was the one who went to I was the one who I went there for the site inspection, and I was called to come and talk from radiation point of view, why we gave the go ahead. And based on the basic physics and the way it's applied, there's not much that can be done to authorize them, because everything stays inside. And the one of the funny thing, especially if you're not from a nuclear background or from radiation background, one of the funny things their lawyer raised was that we were going to generate radioactive material, which will go into their sewage, and it will devalue their properties. Yes, that he raised. Then I have to just go into the basic physics that these guys are dealing with electricity generated radiation. When the radiation is switched off, they are not producing any radioactive materials. But if you are dealing with radioactive materials, then yes. So we became very careful as in where to site even a nuclear basically because of the unsealed sources they are basically with nuclear medicine facilities. So we became very careful where you need to site a nuclear medicine facility. So the major things coming to us will be siting of facilities, and then yes, people visiting at some hospitals that they want us to know whether they are authorized or not. We do get that information a lot, including medical doctors. Some of them they get referral from some facilities, then they say, they are not sure this facility has been authorized. So they call us that, do we know this facility? Have they been authorized?
Great.
Those...
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that information. I have another pretty question I wanted to ask you. Do you know, does a measure atomic clock also, is it also a radioactive equipment? And also, does our telecommunication towers are also one of them?
The first one is what? Measure clock?
Yeah, measure clock or atomic clock.
Ah, atomic clock. Well, what does it do? I'm hearing it for the first time.
Okay, they are clocks, precise clocks that mostly used in specifically maybe in astronomy, where they keep their time constant, and mostly that gives us our accurate time. So the most precise clock ever in the world, or clocks that you use, or clocks that you know, they all come from atomic clock, more precise than even GPS clock.
Oh, so probably let me say this, that the last time any radioactive material or radiation emitting equipment was used in clocks was basically before there was what they call the radium dial. So the radium dial basically tells you that there is so when you're in the dark, what happens that radium happens to glow. It glows in dark. So they were being used to illuminate the arms of the hour, second, and then the minute hand in your wristwatch. Now, that was the last time the radioactive materials were used. So I'm wondering what, well, maybe I'm wondering why that, because it became a very concern, because if you are looking at protection of people and the environment, it became a world concern that why should you do that when these things are emitting radiation and we want to limit people from receiving unnecessary radiation as well. Good. Now, the second one has to do with, let me remember, please remind me.
Telecommunication towers we have
Good.
around.
Good. So with the telecommunication, it's a very not too complicated, but it's a concern for most Ghanaians. Yes, for most Ghanaians, because you realize that some communities they've cited this telecommunication around. Now, studies done by Dr. Amoakun Eta from Gyekye, from Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, says that, and you can find this from Radiation Protection Dosimetry. It's one of the science journals. It's been published. Is an Oxford journal, which it has actually been published. Now, the studies done by Amoakun Eta says that if you mount a telecommunication mask, now the people from his studies, he realized the people under the mask are free from radiation exposure. But the people who are immediately about some meters, he talked about 100 meters, about 200 meters, because where the angle is projected, because when you have a mask, it's always projected to a certain angle and it emits in that direction. So the people in that direction are open to some radiation effects. Okay, he didn't say they are going to get radiation effects, but he said they are open to some radiation effects. Now, some radiation effects from radiation protection, and what we are looking at is what we call stochastic effects. Now, stochastic effect is when you consistently being exposed to radiation in the next 20 or 30 years' time, you might exhibit some kind of cancers. Okay, now, when he projected that, now what also means is that if that population, they do not undergo any X-ray examinations, they are not exposed to any background radiation, because background radiation also gives stochastic effects. Yes, because you get an individual who's never had anything with radiation at all. They've never interacted with radiation, but they do get cancers. Cancer of the colon, cancer of the breast, and you're wondering, how did they get it? It may be due to through other activities, human life activities. Okay, so what he projected was that the people within, under the mask at a certain meters, are safe from the dangers of radiation. But the people who are away from the radiation, because it's projected in a certain angle, are basically being exposed to, let me say, what we call the cosmic radiation. They're being exposed to radiation, which is a very limited amount of radiation, similar to that of cosmic radiation, which is the sun. Yeah. So there's a concern. I know a lot of concern as to whether it's going to cause cancer, it will do that. But you must know that for the radiation, good, let me also add this, that for the radiation emitted from the mask is what we call the non-ionizing radiation. Now, for you to get cancer, or an individual to get cancer, you must be emitted to what we call the ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation basically means it goes straight into your body cells and it interacts with your cells. But for non-ionizing radiation, it has no power to go into your cells to ionize your cells to cause what we call the abnormal cell in you which starts developing to cause what we call cancer. No. Non-ionizing cannot do that. And that's what the mask is. The mask is non-ionizing. It cannot cause that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm thinking, but before I make this statement, we have one atomic clock currently. It's really under your nose. So if you can look at that and see if that also is part of those things. It's a GSSTI, so you can look into it. But Doc, what I want to put across, I think you keep mentioning about this cancer treatment, and look as if this is one of the things that is also under your regulatory, and also we know about the mass public where somebody have a cancer, then become like kind of canker, and we intend to declare the person like already dead. So it looks as if there is a promising thing coming from this field. So I would like to make this appeal. If we would like to can bring you back again, so you really dive into this cancer treatment and the processes that somebody have to go through. If you have this, how you have to go through and whom you have to talk to. I will be glad if you come back again to treat this area for us and some of the questions that we have to take about some of these things.
Yeah, that's fine, because I've had, although I am into this field, I've had close people going through cancer, and in fact, this is what I do, and the reason I'm stressing on this is in fact I've seen that it's happening, is close to me, is everywhere. So yes, even if you need a clinical approach, I can recommend someone who can also give you the clinical approach to as well.
Thank you so much. Yes, my colleagues, any other question? Laura, we thank you for joining from Lesotho. Yes, iPhone. Yeah, please just tell us your name. Then continue.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Godwin Tete, a former national service personnel at Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. Okay, my question is: there's a conspiracy that it is not advisable to expose yourself to X-ray photograph more than, let's say, 3 times in a year. So I want to find out from the expert whether that statement or that conspiracy is true or it's just a speculation. Thank you.
Yeah, Doc, please over to you.
Good. So thank you. Good question. So is not cast in stone that an individual should not be exposed to X-ray radiation 3 times in a year. Now, in radiation protection, there's what we call justification. So let's say you, the individual, you've been exposed to radiation by way of your application, which is normal applications to other places, you want job, legal cases, and any other things. So you've already been exposed to X-ray for 3 times, okay? And then, unfortunately for you, you are involved in an accident. So are we going to say that because you've been exposed to 3 times radiation in a year, within that same year, we are not going to treat you? No. Is a no. So the 3 times in a year is applicable to a normal person if you have no complications. Now, the moment you begin having complications, the 3 times does not work for you anymore. Because I can tell you that the medical people who go for fluoroscopy examinations and all that, they are exposed to a radiation amount of about 18 and 19 times. Why are they being exposed to that amount of radiation? Because you need to save the individual. But when the individual is not showing any medical symptoms, then the 3 times is applicable. Yeah. That's my response for that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question? Okay. On behalf of Doc, you want to say something?
No, I don't say anything.
All right. Okay. Then on behalf of PRAGSAC team, we would like to say a very big thank you for your time, giving us all this in-depth knowledge about the regulating radiating authority in Ghana and what they do, the process they go through just to protect the public. We are so much grateful, and we hope to keep up this with you, and also through our channel or what we do, contact you again, or for you to come on our platform again to educate the public and as well as our team members. We are so much grateful. God richly bless you. Audience, I thank you so much for making time. God bless you. See you next month for the next edition. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.
Praise the Lord.